Today's first reading is taken from the last chapter of the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah can be divided into three parts. The first part is about the second half of the 8th century, about 750 to 700, when the prophet is concerned about what's going wrong in Israel at the time. And he warns them really to be honest, to pray, to come back to the true worship of the temple and not to make it an opportunity to make money. And he warns them about the Assyrians. And the Assyrians will come in 722 and they will capture 10 tribes of Israel. And we don't know what they did with them, but they're gone. Now there's only 2 tribes left. And then in 701, the Assyrians once again surround Jerusalem. However, mysteriously, there's a plague that occurs and Jerusalem is saved. The first book is about that, first part of the book of Isaiah. The second part is over 150 years later, in the 6th century, when the Jews this time are taken to Babylon for the Babylonian captivity for 70 years. And then the third book is about at the end of the captivity when they come on back. And when they come on back to Jerusalem, the third part of the book of Isaiah talks about how they should rejoice and be happy because of all they've gone through. And now, in a way, they should remember that God is like a loving mother holding them in the arms of God and nourishing them. Now, many scholars say that the book of Isaiah is really foretelling us about the gospel itself. That in this book of Isaiah you have the glory of God, and even Isaiah being sent out. And when God speaks to Isaiah, "Whom will I send?" And in trepidation Isaiah said, "Send me. Send me to preach the goodness and glory of God." You have also in there a story about how a virgin will give birth, and by that time things will be better. It doesn't refer directly to the birth of Jesus, but certainly indirectly. You have also in the second book that the Messiah will be a suffering servant, that he will carry the transgressions and the sins of others, to free them. And then, of course, many great scholars say there's a direct line from the book of Isaiah to the Gospels. Now, noted perhaps one of the greatest scriptural scholars today, belonging to the Church of England, a bishop in that church, he says that the direct line from Isaiah not only goes to the Gospels, but they go to the Declaration of Independence in the United States and the U.S. Constitution. That the values in Isaiah come about really in the American experiment. Quite a statement. Some people would say it's a stretch. Oh, some people say the Constitution, Declaration of Independence came from Locke and Montesquieu. Long before Montesquieu came up with the 3 branches of government, we go back to the time of the Jews, and we see that they had prophets who ruled, priests who ruled, and kings who ruled. We know that King David After he had committed adultery and murder, there was a prophet who would approach him and tell him how wrong he was. Then he realized he had to shape up. We have the prophet Amos criticizing the priest at Bethel, not following his vocation. So you have three branches of way of government in Israel: prophets, kings, and priests, each checking upon the other. Long before Montesquieu talked about three branches of government. You have, of course, in the Jewish Testament, we are made in the image and likeness of God. No other civilization before that came up with that concept, that we are like God, giving us a special dignity and individuality. We have Adam and Eve walking in the evening time with God, a family together. And we have these things all being reinforced. The Ten Commandments really about respect for your neighbor, that your neighbor is an individual just like you with dignity. Whatever civilization, they say the Greeks had some democracy. That was for the wealthy and the few. The prophet Jeremiah says, from the least to the greatest, God will reveal himself. From the least to the greatest, they will know God, even the least. The prophets throughout the Old Testament talk about taking care of the widow, taking care of the orphan, taking care of the poor, where the other civilizations enslaved them. And of course, the Jews themselves were enslaved in Egypt. What they wanted was freedom. They were enslaved again in Babylon. They wanted freedom. And of course, in 1770s in the United States, they wanted freedom, independence. They did not want taxation. It was unfair. Just as Amos talked about the unfair taxation in the northern kingdom. And one of the great problems, even when Christ came to the temple, it was all about political corruption. And of course, he wanted to cleanse the temple itself. So we have finally a Jesus coming to the temple, because he is the temple itself, the Messiah, who will finally bring justice to this evil world of ours. And certainly the founding fathers wanted justice. They were not perfect. They couldn't come together to free the African Americans. It would take another religious movement in the United States, the Great Second Awakening in Lincoln, to do that. And we see also in the 20th century how religion influenced the civil rights movement. So we see this strong evidence of religion in the founding of our country, and as it grows and develops into the greatest country in the world. But something began to happen in the second half of the 20th century. You have some court cases, the Everson case. The Everson case talks about limiting or not giving help to non-government schools, religion schools. Somehow, religion is to take a back seat. It's not to be spoken of in the public forum. In 1962, you have a Supreme Court decision that outlaws prayer, the prayer of a board of education in a public school. And you have 3 or 4 other Supreme Court decisions after that. One in 1985 that says you cannot have a minute of meditation or prayer in a public school. In 92, It says you cannot have a clergyman come to a public school graduation. And in 2000, the Supreme Court once again says you cannot have prayer at a public school football game. They cannot pray together. It's against the Constitution. What has happened to our Constitution and how it's being interpreted? Completely different in the first 150 years. There's a story told of an owner having a gardener who came to him and said, the huge tree in front of your house is dead. And the owner said, how can it be dead when it's blossoming still? And the gardener says, the roots are dead. And when the roots are dead, there's no longer energy coming up through the trunk to the branches. And the only reason it's blossoming now is there still is some sap there in the branches. But soon when that's gone, it'll fall over. The question is our country like that? Have we gone so far away from the roots of our foundation? So far away from transcendent moral order, where civic virtue, civic morality was strong, because there's a freedom of religion, and now it's being threatened. Some people could say we cannot recover. But remember Isaiah. Remember the Jewish prophets. They would speak about what was wrong, what was corrupt about their nation and about their religion. But they always would end up by saying the Messiah will come and it all change again. Perhaps our nation will be like Christianity itself. People will write it off at different eras. With the French Revolution, they say it's all over. Religion is out. And to some extent, that was the beginning of the modern world. The scientific revolution would replace religion. And now people realize that science may have been behind or helped out more trouble in the world than people realize. Yes, our nation can rise again if it goes back to its roots. The roots in a belief in God, a loving God, a God that recognizes or is implanted in everyone a likeness to himself. And when we take away this likeness, it comes from God, and we say the government gives us our rights, then the blossoms will soon disappear. So let us return to the roots, and in the roots we will discover a new rising in our country, a new independence.